Hi, I'm Terry Murphy, Senior Editor for Realty Times, Women in Business, Women in Real Estate in the Men's Room with Murph. And today we have an incredible woman in real estate and in business, and Saul Klein, which everybody knows. Everybody knows Saul Klein. But let me just tell you a little bit about why we're here. We're going to be talking about future-proofing real estate and getting insights from these two visionaries. Just to give you a little background on Saul, he's an MLS expert. We've known each other really a long time, Saul. What do you think?
Yeah, a long time.
He's a CEO, data advocate, entrepreneur, real estate industry futurist. We brought the internet to real estate with a group called the Internet Crusade. A pioneer, a historian, online community creator. He's a great grandpa, by the way, as well. And he's a realtor emeritus. And so welcome, Saul.
Yeah, it's great to be here. Now, my latest, you forgot, I'm the CEO of a multiple listing service for almost
Well,
2 years now.
considering that everybody else would be on a cruise or someplace playing mahjong, here you are still working. And then we have the woman, and she is quite a force. Dear Lord. You may not know what ARELLO stands for. Why don't you tell us a little bit about that, Jessica?
I would love to. So ARELLO is another fun acronym that we've got in our industry, which stands for the Association of Real Estate Licensed Law Officials. So Association of Real Estate Licensed Law Officials is ARELLO.
Yeah, well, let's talk about that. You're the chief executive officer, but you have a resume that takes like 13 pages. She's a little bit of an overachiever. It's got a lot of members, and you've been handling boards of real estate. You really have quite a between you and Saul, we could write into the whole book. We'd have to call in John Riley for that, who's our partner at the Data Advocate. So here's the thing. Saul, you've spent more than 15,000 hours of speaking to real estate professionals across the country. You were ePro. We did the Internet Crusade thing, taking the terror out of technology. You are totally recognized as one of the top influencers in the real estate industry for decades. You were there at the first Paris Paradigm in Paris with MLS Innovation for Global Standards. How does, in your opinion, how have you seen well, since we started with what's a URL and what's a website, why don't you tell us a little bit about how you've seen the role of technology as it evolves in our industry?
Sure. Well, it's great to be here, Terry and Jessica. It's great to see you. And,
Like,
ARELLO is one of my favorite organizations. And while maybe some people don't know about it, I've known about it for a number of years. And when we had to get ePro certified for continuing education, the organization we went to was ARELLO. And what that allowed us to do is get continuing education certified in, I don't even remember now, it might have been like 30 different states. And so I owe a debt of gratitude to ARELLO and what it's helped us do over the years. And I know many real estate educators, trainers, and folks that are members of ARELLO. So it's great to be here and to be able to talk about one of my favorite subjects, which is technology, and in particular, technology and real estate. And so you're right, Terry. We go way back, and when I read this question, it's like, how do you even define technology? The wheel was technology, right? And while I wasn't around for the wheel, you got to say, well, what's the context for this, right? And like my first use of technology in real estate were calculators, handheld calculators. Now, you might remember, and maybe you don't, there was a time when you weren't allowed to use the calculator on the state exam for real estate.
That's right.
Right? You couldn't use it. And the reason had to do with not everybody could afford a calculator. And because not everybody could afford a calculator, you couldn't use a calculator. And so, a lot of ways to define technology, but, kind of look at when I started selling real estate, we had technology, we called it a book. And I guess the latest technology there was the glue that held the book together, because before we had the glue holding the book together, we had individual sheets of paper that we had to put in a 3-ring binder. And then all of a sudden we had dumb terminals, right? We had access to digitization of the book. And that was in the mid 1970s. And this was just amazing to be able to access the content in the book in a digital way. And of course, the internet, which was created probably around 1969, we weren't really using the internet at that time. We were using phone lines to access a database that had all the same stuff that we had in the book. And the dumb terminals kind of progressed. We kind of got to the internet phase in what Tim Berners-Lee invented the World Wide Web in like 1989, and you and I probably met in 1994, and were participating. The browser, I think, Netscape went public in 1995. So you think that's like 30 years ago, right? And lots has changed, and at the same time, lots remains the same. There's a lot that really hasn't changed. So we went from the calculator to dumb terminals to the internet to CRM tools. I wrote a piece this morning on Top Producer, which was around back in the 1980s, which people used. Wow. It was DOS. It was before people were actually using Windows. And the interesting thing is, you still had to show people property. You still had to write contracts. You still had to present contracts and negotiate. You still had to walk the transaction through to its completion. So even though we had all this technology entering the real estate space, much of the real estate transaction remained the same. And so today, we've got some newer technology that we're kind of playing with, and that's blockchain and artificial intelligence and cryptocurrencies, which kind of along the blockchain line. And so it's kind of interesting to me as I watch how the industry will evolve beyond that. MLS itself is a technology. And that's undergoing a lot of change right now, and access to the data and licensing of the data and transparency of the data. And all of these things to me kind of fit right into ARELLO's wheelhouse.
Well, and that's a perfect entry for Miss Jessica, because as the CEO and of ARELLO, here you are at this position here where we've got the intersection of regulation and innovation. And how do you have any visions of your own, or what are you seeing that ensures that the industry actually adapts to this? I mean, Saul and I, like I said, when we started real estate, you were typing out the MLS sheets and mailing them. So now we have this ubiquity of the internet and accessibility and not necessarily correct information. So tell us a little bit about how you feel about how that intersection is going to actually work.
Yeah, I would love to. First, I'll tell you a little bit about my background. I did cut my teeth in the real estate industry. I was just a baby when I got in 1999. So real estate is what I know as far as this industry. And it started off with the Realtor Association. And I have run the gamut of, I was a real estate broker a lifetime ago, working in real estate and property management. So I know exactly what you're talking about, Saul, when you talk about, getting into the different MLSs and how they have evolved over the years. Everything from accessing the properties to compiling the properties. But from there, I moved into the association management world in about 2012, and I ran a medium-sized local board out of Springfield, Missouri, and ran the regional MLS from there. So we took a moment to bring in 12 different associations. It ended up being 7 once it was all done, and regionalized to become the Southern Missouri Regional MLS. And I was their general manager upon their inception, and really got a good taste of technology from there and all of the options that are out there. From there, I had moved on to run a state association in the state of Oklahoma prior to coming to ARELLO in January of 2024. So It's been a good ride, and real estate is everything that I know. So I can say that I saw Saul teaching at one of the real estate conferences way back as early as 2002 or 2003, and talking about the internet crusade and all of the things that were coming. So Saul, I'm honored to be on this podcast with you because I have always looked up to the innovations that you've brought to it. So I'll also be digging in for some of those ARELLO historical pieces of gold you might have later. But Terry, to answer your question, I believe that the first common thread is whether you're looking at it from the data perspective or the consumer perspective, the common thread is just that. In the technology world, the data is the thread. It doesn't matter if that data was compiled in a 3-ring binder or the glue on the books that Saul talks about. It's still data. And it's still compiled. And whether that's in that format or in the format of a RETS feed or an IDX feed that's coming from the MLS, there's multiple ways that we can use the data to make sure that the consumer is being served. So that's the second thread on the other side. And probably the most important thread that ARELLO focuses on is what is in the best interest of the consumer. So those are the two common threads that both the Realtor Association and ARELLO have in common. So we are the national association that represents the real estate commissions, the state agencies, jurisdictions all across the nation. In fact, we're international. We do have a lot of provinces in Canada that we also serve. But our job is to not just offer that support to the commissions, but also to keep our finger on that pulse of what's happening in data technology, what's coming down that pipeline of how the industry is flowing and not just how the licensees are doing business, but what do the consumers need? So when we talk about real estate regulation and innovation, yes, both sides of it, the realtor side and the licensee side, as far as the jurisdictions and the real estate commissions, do need to work together on that. So some of the data that we bring to the table the licensing data. So active licenses, ARELLO does run a license verification system. So you can verify if a license is active or not. But in addition to that, we also do a disciplinary action database and keep track of all the disciplinary actions. And then on top of that, we also accredit the national exams. So Saul, you talked a little bit about what ARELLO does in the world of education. That was just scratching the surface with some of our certifications on distance education, when you say with the ePro and how that all kind of formed and then evolved into everything that it is today. So it's kind of exciting to see from the other perspective, from the licensing regulators' perspective on things. We all want a higher bar for entry into the industry. And in order to raise that bar, we got to have good quality education, pre-licensing and schools going forward with that. So that's kind of some of the things that we do. Just to integrate in taking the data of what's happening and using it from the licensing perspective.
Wow. So that's why you are so well positioned to be there as the CEO, because when you've had boots on the ground, you understand the industry from a totally different aspect. And Saul, you've been a pioneer in highlighting technology way back. I mean, we were doing this, REPCO, the Real Estate Education Publishing Company, and that was way back in the early 90s, wasn't it? Pretty much.
Yeah, well, and I used to teach pre-licensing and real estate principles and real estate practices. Matter of fact, I had an interesting conversation. I think, Jessica, didn't you have the ARELLO conference here in San Diego a couple weeks ago?
Yeah.
We did. Yeah, we had our mid-year meetings, and I had heard that you'd met with some of our members, our longtime members that are educators. And I was a little jealous that I I almost crashed the party and showed up for the dinner. But
well, you should have. We had a great time because it's so much fun to be around people who can talk real estate.
Yeah.
Right. To be around a whole bunch of real estate trainers where the conversation we can focus on things like what's on the exam? What should be on the exam? What do we mean when we're measuring the competency that's required to be a licensee? Right? Those kinds of things. And it was just a fascinating conversation, and always have a good time talking real estate with people. But that is a big question, right? You take the real estate exam, who gets to decide what are the skill sets required? What's the knowledge required for someone to get their license and then to practice real estate? And where does that come from? And who makes those decisions? And does the legislature just pass that, or right? Where does that come from? So, and I think ARELLO's got a big part in, or nationwide, a big, or I guess North America wide.
Yeah, I was just going to say it's bigger
Right.
than that. So, Saul, I mean, we talked about paradigm shifts. You were talking about this 30 years ago. What's currently impossible could be possible. And so there's a technology, I'd like to say a disruption, a tech disruption, because as AI comes in, it's always that brand new thing that's so wonderful, but then there's the flip side. So what makes it not wonderful? So
Well,
what do you
so
think is the next big disruption?
yeah, well, so first, something that we maybe kind of have lost sight of is that just real estate search itself
Oh, wow.
has changed, right? So prior to the World Wide Web, the way people found what was for sale is they had to contact a practitioner. They had to find somebody who was a member of the MLS, or you walk down the street and the real estate brokerage firm would have pictures of what the listings on their window. But search for real estate took place. The first point of contact was a real estate licensee. Well, the internet, and in particular the World Wide Web, has changed that, because people first go now to the web. They first go online. And the second point of contact is now probably the real estate professional. So, and remember, Terry, we were on that first Realtor.com team when all these listings went up, and Realtor.com was the #1 most visited real estate website in the world. And along came Zillow, and along came Trulia, and along came Homes.com and Cyber, and all of these. So now the consumer is used to searching out information on the internet, and then they go armed with a lot of information to the real estate professional. And in parts of the world where there is no MLS, you really don't know what you're getting when you go up and look at information that's on the web. Here, we've got a better handle on the way we disseminate that information. We try to make it transparent. And so just search itself is a major change. Now, other changes, I think I mentioned blockchain technology, I think will probably have a major effect on the transfer of real property. It'll have an effect on title insurance and title insurance fees. This ability to, with a blockchain, with this decentralized, distributed, immutable database, really, to be able to validate certain things that we haven't been able to validate before. And then you can take blockchain one step further, and you can talk about cryptocurrency. And I know that people will they're already doing it, but to a much greater degree, using cryptocurrency to buy and sell real estate in the future. I was talking to a person from a title company the other day, and they actually are set up to handle a purchase using cryptocurrency. Mm-hmm. And then with the fractionalization of just about anything, you can fractionalize real property. So now you have a whole new way to own property. And I can buy now a piece, just like I can buy a piece of a cryptocurrency. I could buy a piece of real estate. Matter of fact, I did a couple years ago with an experiment where the property, where I bought a piece of a house. You did too. That's right. Where you bought, I got my money back too. They sold it, right? But that was good. Now they're buying hotels, and you can, it kind of democratizes, right? You can, anybody with, a small amount of money can now buy a piece of real estate. So I think the fractionalization of real property and ownership and cryptocurrencies, and of course artificial intelligence, the big buzz. And I think that that's got the capability to change lots of things in real estate. And while we say there's still the personal touch needed, that's true. And but the AI is getting better and better. And so I'm not sure exactly where that's headed. So all of these things are going to have an impact on the transfer of real property, on the buying and selling of real property, on the opportunities that people have buying and selling real property. So for me, it's exciting because I'm an advocate for real estate. And I love the fact that there are going to be new ways for people to own real estate.
I know, and how perfect, I think, for you, Jessica, to be in this position of such power, because there's going to be a real play between fostering the innovation, monitoring without stifling the progress as well. But then, like Saul just said, it's going to change how we test. It's going to change how we educate. It's going to change how we market and have communication. Tell us what you think about, from your vantage point, being the CEO of ARELLO. How are we going to navigate that?
Well, I think the first way to navigate that is to not lose sight of what we're doing, and that's protecting the public. Data runs off of facts, not emotion, and data is facts, and those facts will always be there. And the way those facts are logged in blockchain technology, and those facts are logged in the way AI spits out an answer for somebody who's asking a question, those facts don't, where the facts are great, we don't want to lose sight of protecting the public. And I think that's where an expert and a real estate professional is going to have to come in and say, make sure that, that we're still protecting the consumer, that we're still looking out for fair housing laws. So I think that the evolving and the technology is a wonderful thing, but we can't lose sight of what it is that we're in this industry to do, and that is to protect the consumer. So I think that that's, one thing that we can keep sight of on that. But the next thing is just to stay educated. So many times we've heard the saying, uninformed leaders making decisions is the worst thing that can happen. And, we can apply that to association management or MLS management all day long, but we could also apply it to our government there too, and say uninformed decisions, uninformed leaders making decisions is not a good thing. So we have to stay informed. So it's good for everyone who's practicing in this industry to stay involved by subscribing to podcasts and listening to what's going on, but ultimately remembering what it is that we do, and that's protect the consumer. So learning about these technologies. So some of the things that ARELLO is doing is taking those technologies for the way people study for exams, to touch back onto the exam piece of things. If we're going to raise the bar of entry and enhance the professionalism of the licensee getting into the business and practicing real estate, we need to ensure that very first, the job task analysis is a good one and accurately displays what it is that a licensee does in the industry today. And that, we believe as ARELLO, needs to continue to be enhanced. So that job task analysis is what exam providers use to build their exam questions. And if that job task analysis is not accurate, or it's outdated, or there's information in there that doesn't really pertain to the industry and how it's done today, then we don't have good, accurate questions. And now the pre-licensed schools don't have outlines that they can actually teach from in order to keep people on the forefront of all the technology changes in our industry. So we at ARELLO think it's extremely important to focus on what is that job task analysis of what a licensee does when they are in the fields.
Jessica, one of the questions I like to ask people is, what is the job description of a real estate broker or a real estate agent 5 years from now? How would you describe? And what are the skill sets that are required for someone to be successful in the real estate industry 5 years from now? And get people's imaginations going as they look at the technology, because I agree with you 100%. Education is a key piece. And we've always talked about lifelong learning, right, Terry? Yeah. Right? Always talked about lifelong learning.
It's a mantra for him.
But now it becomes even more important. And the future definition of a real estate broker could be a lot different than what it is today. And and you mentioned, Jessica, the data and what happens with the data. And there's so much, particularly with the ability to forecast when you have the data, to do predictive analytics with the data, right? And the data's when you're searching a website using artificial intelligence to maybe identify what a buyer's interested in before they even know what they're interested in, just based on the things that they've looked at, or to be able to look at factors that might tell you which areas are going to appreciate how much over a certain period of time based on bringing lots of data together. I was playing with some people that were integral in the development of Walk Score. You probably can't see this, but this is an interesting diagram. And what these people are talking about is creating a health score. And that they say that the environment, the transportation infrastructure, the land use, the walkability, the pedestrian environment, the green space, all of that, the characteristics of the real estate lead to behaviors, human behaviors and human exposures like dietary intake, physical activity, social interaction, exposures to things like air pollution, traffic safety and noise, and that leads to a biological response. That would be things like obesity, systemic inflation, and stress. And those things lead to chronic disease. And so if you could start looking at all of the data in a particular area, you might, like you can come up with a walk score, come up with a health score. And who would be interested in that? Like insurance companies, again, from the data, analyzing the data, using artificial intelligence. So a real estate agent needs to kind of know about these things as we kind of move out into the future, right?
Skill advancement is required. Go ahead.
No, I'm sorry to interrupt you, Terry.
Skill advancement is going to be core to, because we have a new consumer. The consumer we had 30 years ago, Saul, is not the same one you have now. So it's which you always call it the pivot. You know, there's this moment to pivot and it's here. But go ahead, Jessica, tell us what your thoughts are.
Well, I was just going to say to that point too, as far as health scores and things, you know, any broker out there or licensee that is selling real estate, don't just pay attention to the property data of what's happening. You look at what else is happening there. That's how you're going to grow your business. If you are in commercial real estate and now you know that there's a big tendency or a propensity for health issues in a certain area, then why are you not talking to those that are building medical centers and bring, you know, that commercial real estate in? So, you know, real estate licensees need to pay attention to all the data, not just one piece of it, because it certainly tells a story or a picture of what's happening. And, you know, and then it's all syncing somehow to your Apple Health, probably. So you'll know if
on your watch.
Yeah, it's on your watch. Yeah. Know exactly how many steps it is from your house to that medical center or whatever. But, you know, it's just to your point that data is only going to get stronger, faster, better. And and if you are doing your job and staying on top of what that is, and again, finding that common thread of public protection, consumer protection, and looking out for your buyers and sellers. And if you are using that data for good and not for evil, then you can only win from there. So data is good to the evolution of it is good.
Yeah. Well stated. Well, Saul, you know, we've talked about this before with professionalism. We've talked, because you've taught ethics, I've taught ethics. You know, there are organizations like ARELLO, they're going to have to elevate standards to accommodate these different changes. And right now we've gone from, we've always tried to be, but it's gone from a transactional platform to a relationship. And as we see AI integrated into different strategic partners and, you know, that kind of thing, I think it's going to raise the need for new monitoring and readjusting how we create the professional level. What do you think, Saul?
Well, yeah. So I think as I look at ARELLO, you know, developing ethical guidelines or assisting in the development of ethical guidelines and providing education and training to regulators and to real estate professionals and even to consumers about the buying, the selling, what you need to know, how your data should be handled, privacy, security. I mean, I just kind of see this huge menu for ARELLO moving into the future. And again, as we get to this, what is a real estate broker 5 years from now? What are the skill sets required of real estate? Or what's the consumer of real estate going to expect 5 years from now? And then how do you, as a real estate professional, how do you differentiate yourself from all the other real estate professionals? And some people would say there are too many people in real estate. That's a whole nother conversation. And yeah, how do you raise the bar? Remember, we used to say, Internet Crusade, raising the bar without leaving anyone behind. Well, maybe it's time to leave people behind, right? How do you go about doing that? How do you measure all that? And who's going to do it? And then across state lines, that's a key piece. And then internationally, because with this ease of moving back and forth internationally, and buying and selling real estate, possibly internationally, we all participate in the International MLS Forum. There's lots going on, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, well, it's a brand new time, and obviously ARELLO is going to, you've been the power behind raising standards. I think you're going to find a different, you talk about what you see in 5 years from now. I don't think you're going to be able to maintain that professional level of standard without skill advancement, with certification, as an example, in negotiating, not negotiating just with communication, but negotiating the entire process of the transaction. So do you have an example of something, how your team is anticipating this, Jessica?
Yeah, actually, I do. I'll kind of let you in on a little future insight to what ARELLO is working on. We are getting ready to make some big implementations to our data sets that we have. I mentioned the license verification system that we have. As of right now, the licensing jurisdictions give us a feed of active licenses, as I said. We also have disciplinary actions on top of that. But you've also heard me say a lot in the past few minutes of how important it is to protect the consumer. So with our overhaul of what we're doing with our technology systems, as of right now, we've got a lot of data, what we call digest data. How many licensees are getting into the business? How many are applying for licenses? How many have certain continuing education credits in a certain state versus another state? All of these jurisdictions are reporting that data to us. And so now, if we can get it to where we have a common thread in that data set, to where MLSs and associations are not just checking records against membership records, they're actually checking it with the jurisdictional licensing records. If for some reason a licensee has a license that is suspended or revoked at any time, there has always been a lag between the communication between the Real Estate Commission to the MLS or to the association, and even the brokers sometimes. They don't realize that a license was probably found in a violation of a disciplinary action at one of their monthly commission meetings. So if that license is suspended, we need that license to be talking to the MLS subscriber data and say, if it's suspended or revoked, it's automatically turned off at the state, but then it's turned off at the MLS, it's turned off at the associations, and it's turned off with the broker. So when you look at technology advancements and you look at what that strategic plan looks like is, the Realtor Association has all the Realtor member data. The MLSs have all the MLS subscriber data. We have the licensing data. So if we can all three talk together, and if one turns off or moves companies or somewhere, the data all talks to each other. So that's ultimately what ARELLO's goal is in the coming. Now it's going to take a little bit, as anything, it's a big project and a big ship to turn around, but It's a good, exciting thing to ensure that we are implementing a data structure that's accurate, gives the information about licensing. And that way, when a licensee, to your point, Saul, about crossing jurisdictions, if something happens in one state and they go apply for a license in another state, if there's a revocation or a suspension on that license, the other state needs to know. Now, we can do that currently with our data, but it needs to be more real time with the MLSs and the association data.
So there's that assimilation, Saul, of integration of information that serves everybody.
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. Exactly.
Well, if you were advising a real estate professional today, Saul, what would you tell them for adapting? First of all, I think that you're going to see a lot of people, especially with the current job situation, trying to get into real estate because no matter what, everybody needs, food, shelter, and clothing. And shelter seems to be, to me, one of the most positive parts of it. What would you tell them, Saul?
We're back to lifetime learning and being adaptable and paying attention to people and organizations like ARELLO, like your real estate association, brokers that you know. When I first got started in real estate, I had a couple of people who I really looked up to, and I learned a lot from them. And I think to have the right mentors and don't expect to be an overnight success, and look at ways to differentiate yourself from the competition. There are so many ways to differentiate yourself today because of the changes that are taking place. And pay attention to the technology. Don't get lost. A lot of people, remember we used to say you don't need to know how the computer works. You just got to know how to turn it on. But nowadays, you need to know a little bit more than that. And don't be afraid of it. And don't be afraid to experiment. Like our old partner, Mike Barnett, used to say, hit every key, you paid for them all. And so, take a chance and be open-minded and know that the industry is going to change, but also know it's still a people business. People are still going to look to you for confidence, for knowledge, and that will be a key differentiator in your success moving forward.
Boots on the ground. And we had one of the first computers. They were like trucks. Do you remember what the brand was? They were some kind of Earth thing, I think. It was amazing. We're learning about, NAR didn't even have email, if you recall. I mean, it was internal. So when you look back, it gives you a perspective of how it's changed incredibly, and it continues to evolve. So that puts ARELLO in the most perfect place because, as the leader of that organization, that literally is going to shape how we position ourselves as, a resource to the consumer, which is because I bought my first house and nobody mentioned it didn't have heat. No. And it was in Wisconsin. So which is why I got my real estate license. And then the second thing, it was this beautiful little piece of property on the Wisconsin River. Well, no one mentioned it was in the river every April. So, which is why I got my own license, so I could help people ask those questions. So, as this leader, what do you think is going to be on the horizon? And obviously, I know you have some thoughts, but, in the next, say, year or 2 years, what do you see for ARELLO really stepping up?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I wish I did have a crystal ball here that sat on my desk and could tell us all what's going on. I'll tell you that I think one thing that education is extremely important and continuing that education. But I think even more so, paying attention to what your fiduciary duty is to those clients and customers and to the public, knowing what that fiduciary is, especially now more than ever. What is that fiduciary duty that you have to your client or just to the public in general? But so that comes along with education. But the other piece of it, and this is actually something that ARELLO does not do, we actually do not do any lobbying or even really any advocacy for the most part. However, we do keep a finger on the pulse of what's happening legislatively across all 50 states, but pay attention to what's happening in our country with the laws being set. The laws that the regulators are carrying out are set by the legislature. And that's one thing that the associations do so well, is that lobbying and advocating and paying attention to that kind of stuff. But if the associations can work with the commissions and talk about what these laws are that are changing because of technology, what are these laws that are coming down that are being built because the regulators have to build rules and regulations off of those laws. So that's what, it all starts with that law. And I think that it's extremely important that anybody who's practicing in this industry and is a licensee needs to pay attention to what's happening, not just at your state capitals, but on the local level too. So I'm a huge fan of advocacy and lobbying for what's right for the consumer on that. So I would just add to that education piece saying, you got to know what your fiduciary is, and we got to protect that. So.
Well, as somebody who works directly with agents and companies, I will tell you, I think it's trust. Trust comes with somebody who appears to be highly competent and informed. Back in the day, Saul, I just joined every committee on my board so I could learn more about ethics, more about professional standards, more about the whole education piece. And so you talk about lifetime learning. You've been a tremendous icon of that principle, because there's always change. Change is inevitable. And here we are in an industry that's been just so solid for so long. And there's a disruption here, and a good one in a way, because it's going to change how we appear to the industry. So in closing, Saul, tell us what you would share as a takeaway message you'd like to hear. You'd like these people that are listening and that care about the industry. What would you tell them?
Well, I would tie it all together with the word trust. And so, and then you just made me think of this. So you need to build trust. And how do you build trust? And my answer has always been, you demonstrate expertise.
Bingo.
And so what are the things that you can do to demonstrate expertise and demonstrate the value you bring to the industry? Advocacy is a key point, but keeping up with the technology, with the laws, with the rules of your MLS, with the litigation that's taking place, knowledge of all of this, demonstrate expertise, be comfortable in communicating that information to other human beings, and you'll be successful in real estate.
And Miss Jessica, I'm sure you have something you'd like to share as well.
Well, I 100% concur with with Saul on that. But I think to the 3 points that we've talked about today is that innovation, regulation, professionalism, they're not opposing forces. They are absolutely working all together. And I think that, I can sit here and talk platitudes all day long about how we want to protect the consumer and we want to protect the public. And I can talk about, how we all want what's right for the world and world peace, right? But the real estate industry is the leader in creating that. And because you're right, people need shelter, food, water, and shelter. And, it's important that we work together on this and that we collaborate together. So that's why I was so honored to come on this podcast today, because I feel like you guys have the brokerage side of things and the MLS side of things and the data side of things, and anything that we can do to have ARELLO members come in and help bring the voice of those regulators, we are happy to do, because we do agree that collaboration is probably the key on that. So
key here is integrity. Integrity comes with expertise. Being all sales is leadership. We know that. And if you are really not working just in the business, but on the business, that's going to put you in a totally different category of differentiation. And Saul, you have all the acronyms for differentiation and consumer demands. I mean, Saul's just, if we went into Saul's garage, we'd probably have an entire library of great, and here's what's annoying about him, Jessica. He can pull it up just like that. He can just grab it behind
right
him.
where it is.
Here's the book. We wrote this in 1992. It's amazing. So I know that whoever's listening to this may want more from you. So Saul, what's the best way to reach you?
Probably going to thedataadvocate.com. That's thedataadvocate.com. And we put information up there on a daily basis. There's lots going on in the industry right now. And yeah, if you follow us there, we'll keep you up to date.
Great. And Miss Jessica, speaking, just in general information, what would be the best way to reach you?
Well, they can always go to our website, ARELLO.org, and they can certainly find us there and find all of our contact information. But I think it's also important to note that we share a lot of our information without having to be a member of ARELLO. So, because information is extremely valuable and good, and informed people making decisions is really what we want for this industry. So, of course, we invite you to all of our conferences, engage with us. Our members are not just the regulatory members. Those are our main members, but we also have affiliate members that go anywhere from brokers to school providers to anyone who's in the industry that wants to see it from the regulator's side. You're always welcome to join us. So I think that's a valuable part to ARELLO is the amount of research and documents that we have for pairing it up with all the artifacts in Saul's garage. That's what we can do.
We've got a saying there, just ask Saul, because he
just
knows.
Ask Saul. Yeah.
Really. And you talk about being an honor. It's always an honor and a privilege to work with people like Saul, and I have been very grateful for that over the years. And Jessica, I'm a big proponent of women in leadership, and you exemplify that leadership. I'm grateful that you would all join us, and I think, if with your opportunity and permission, we might want to follow up in a little bit in the same format to bring more information to the agents, the businesses, the consumers, so they make better decisions. And we continue to elevate that professionalism. And thanks to what you're doing in MLS, Saul, and what you're doing for ARELLO. So thank you very much for joining us.
Absolutely. Thank you.